Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called A Human Was There, written by Dark Prince 010. She was pushing through the crowd when she first saw the sudden movement as the Horpus fell. Charlie had been returning from a discussion about her dissertation with a professor and had just gotten off the hypertram when she saw the jostling in the crowd ahead and the parting of bodies. Disturbances and unexpected sights weren't all that uncommon here. Centrum had become the de facto center of galactic politics, thanks to being a habitable world nearly at the dead center of the Milky Way. It was a large enough planet, with a sufficient range of biomes to accommodate a surprising majority of the sentient species from across the stars. The entire planet was bustling, with trillions of souls packing every layer of the city that spanned its entire surface. Charlie had been excited to earn a position in the graduate program of History of the Centrum due north. Despite some setbacks, her thesis on the underlying factors of the fifth multi-world conflict was going smoothly, of all shapes and morphologies, to see what had happened. The crowd had simply parted around the fallen Horpus, like a river around a rock midstream. A few paused to glance down at the form before proceeding on. The connecting line for the hypertram to take the rest of the way to the Ho apartment was across the street. But Charlie ignored the gentle beeping of the indicator that it was safe to cross the maglev rails and knelt down by the fallen alien. The Horpus was a quadruped, somewhat resembling a horse from Earth, but covered in thumb-sized scales, with feet ending in tri-pointed claws rather than hooves. The figure was wrapped in clothing worn and tattered at the edges, with spots of dirt and grime, suggesting they had not been able to wash it in some time. Despite knowing next to nothing about their physiology, something in Charlie's gut told her something was seriously wrong. She knelt by the alien's head, running her hand along the top of it and murmuring, "It's all right. I'm here. I can help." The creature flinched for a moment before relaxing slightly, though its breathing was still rapid, tight, and ragged. It didn't appear to have any atmosphere filters or supplemental apparatus, so the breathing difficulty seemed out of place. Charlie reached into her pocket with a free hand, freeing her comm slate and quickly dialing the medical response icon. The icon brought up a quick form, which she filled out as best she could before submitting. But many of the questions, such as the creature's sex or age, she had to leave blank. She submitted the form, and her heart plummeted when she saw the estimated arrival time. Nearly an hour and a half. A sound of laughter and celebratory music caught her attention from the catwalk above. She glanced up to see the revelers in the Isu Festival of Plenty were waving streamers and blowing their gratingly loud celebration horns. The festival was a popular one, with millions of others in this part of the city world alone crowding the streets and mag tracks. Charlie suspected this was the main reason for the long delay. The Horpus made another noise, a sound of pain and distress. Its eyes were wide, looking in all directions, but unseeing as it spasmed again. The crowd continued to part around them, as they were made of stone. A hand touched Charlie's shoulder, causing her to start. It was quickly followed by an apology as the old man said, "Sorry about that." It was another human, an uncommon sight in Centrum. He was clad in a bland, barely adequate common coat and outwear that Centrum provided for those who had nothing at all. Similar, she noticed what the Horpus wore. The material was thin, and she could see the man shivering in the cold, but he ran a hand down the creature's neck. There. It'll be all right." He looked up at Charlie and murmured, "Name's James. I used to be a horse stock, large animal vet once upon a time. I don't think it's quite exactly the same," he muttered with a dark chuckle, glancing down at the alien, "but I've got some ideas of what to check." He cleared his throat and spoke softly to the alien, the gravel in his tone almost gone, as he said carefully, "Sir, or ma'am, whoever you are, I'm going to try checking a few things. Let me know if you feel any more pain." He began gently palpitating the creature's hide, careful to pause whenever there was any motion or sound from it. Finally, at one point on the creature's chest, a gentle push resulted in a muted screech, and James threw his hands up, saying, "Oops, sorry, okay. I think I know where the problem is. Damned if I know exactly what's wrong, though. I would say it might be liver blockage, but on a critter like this, it's not the liver. It's something more akin to the lower intestine, another voice had spoken, causing Charlie to look up in surprise. It was another human, this one a young adult in an expensive-looking gold-accented business suit, clearly passing through on their way from the economic district. We lived next to a Harpass family growing up, they said by way of explanation. Unfortunately, it's called the Panandire organ, and it is fairly prone to blockages in old age. It is usually fatal if it can't be treated properly. Here, let me contact an emergency med team. Charlie chuckled bitterly. I already submitted a request. The wait time is over an hour. I think the festival traffic is gumming things up. The new arrival smiled, tapping a merchant crest band on his wrist. Yes, but we can have a private medical team here in half the time. The Harpass's breathing had become shallower, with great effort taken for each breath. As the business person knelt to help James massage the side of the blockage as best they could, they murmured, My name is Morgan. I was just on my way through, but happened to catch sight of you three. They glanced around at the continuous streams of aliens walking past, some stepping over the legs of the humans or the fallen Harpass without a word of comment. How can they just all walk by? Charlie shrugged. I don't know, but I'm at least glad that you two decided to stop. The Harpass shuddered and went still for a moment. Charlie's heart skipped a beat, fearing the worst had happened. But then the Harpass tried to lift its head before letting it droop weakly. It began speaking in a whispering voice of whinnies and grunts, but unfortunately, it was a language Charlie didn't speak. Do any of you understand that? The other two shrugged and grimaced. Sorry, Morgan said. I don't. James shook his head. No idea what your name is, but we're here to help. Her name is Blossom of the tall root tree, came a firm voice. Charlie looked up and couldn't stop herself from gasping. The speaker was a woman, another human, but wearing the uniform of an officer of the Martian Federation, something that instinctively set Charlie's heart racing. Her own mother had been killed on deployment during a skirmish against Martian forces, one of the many that had plagued the Civil War still raging in some sectors of what was once unified human space. In fact, the fractiousness had caused humanity to be denied an official seat in the Unified Council. The Civil War deemed a sign of humanity's brutal nature, at least according to the politicians. Years earlier, Charlie had been overjoyed just to have been extended an invitation to Centrum U North, as admittance rates for non-members of the Alliance were woefully low. The Martian officer must have noticed Charlie's stiffened posture. Her voice softened slightly as she explained, I studied Harpass at the academy, one of several languages I ended up picking up from remembering more than a few words of. She leaned down and began murmuring back to the Harpass in the same language, the low whinnies and grunts sounding as though they would be painful for a human throat to produce. But Charlie could see that they had the intended effect. The Harpass relaxed and stilled, though its breathing became more and more shallow. I don't know if there's anything else to be done, said James next to him. Morgan nodded. I don't think it's long now, James said quietly, and the officer didn't need to ask what he meant. The soldier knelt and began murmuring the same phrase in the Harpass language. Charlie whispered, What are you saying? The soldier let out a slight chuckle. The same words humans heard when we found out there was this whole gathering just a few kilometers away. You're not alone. You are not alone. We are here with you. Charlie nodded, and after a moment did her best to copy the soldiers' voices and tones, smiling slightly at the nod of approval she received. Meanwhile, Morgan, in a quiet tone, barely audible over the background bustle and roar of the city, said softly, I don't remember the words for it, but I do remember that when the family next to us had their first fowl, they sang a lullaby. I think I still remember how it went. They began to hum slow, staccato tune, and after a few bars, James joined in, adding a deep bass note to the song. Charlie continued repeating the Harpass's phrase a few more times before joining and humming, adding a bit of harmony, hoping it was appropriate. Something in her gut told her it felt right. The soldier continued speaking in Harpass, and a few minutes passed. Then the soldier fell silent, as did James. The Harpass had gone still, its breathing absent, its body warm but unmoving. James leaned forward, feeling around for a pulse, guided by Morgan, who pointed to a thinner area of the scales at the base of the neck. A few moments later, he shook his head. I'm afraid she's gone. No one said anything. There was nothing more to be said. Instead, They all waited, cradling the fallen alien, until the glare of the private medical unit's lights arrived minutes later. At Morgan's insistence, they checked the body, and after a few moments, the still form of the Horpos was loaded into the transport and whisked away. The humans stood quietly, unspeaking, as the flow of aliens around them remained unchanging and unceasing. Charlie took a long breath, hearing it hitch in her own throat. The old man stepped forward, giving Charlie a hug, and she sobbed into his shoulder. Morgan stepped forward as well, a bit hesitantly, giving them a squeeze around the shoulders before warming to the embrace. As Charlie wiped her eyes, she noticed the soldier had also turned her face down, standing apart. But Charlie could see the glint of tears on her face. She reached out, grabbing the soldier softly by the arm and pulling her into the huddle. They stood there for what felt like hours, though it was likely only a minute or two, before the soldier was the first to pull away, clearing her throat, wiping her eyes and saying, "I have to be on my way." Before she could start walking away, though, "Just reach out to me, and I'll let you know what the medical unit was able to determine about contacting her family." The soldier nodded and looked at all of them before her gaze locked on Charlie. In her eyes, Charlie saw an echo of the same haunted sorrow that she had glimpsed in her own mother years ago. The soldier said, "Thank you, and I'm sorry," before striding away into the crowd. The rest of them dispersed, and Charlie made her late connection to the hypertram back to her apartment, still clutching Morgan's business card in her hand. She hoped that whoever that Horpus was, they knew that their final moments had been as comfortable as possible, and in the presence of someone, anyone, who cared. Master Gunnery Sergeant Sonata adjusted her uniform, brushing off what she thought might be minuscule specks of dirt, before nodding to the generals flanking her. She felt woefully out of her depth, having been told that rather than serving as an advisor to the Martian delegation at Centrum, she had been requested to take part in some diplomatic proceedings that morning. Politics had never been her strength, but she wasn't one to disobey orders. So she marched alongside the officials who heavily outranked her as they entered the United Alliance's assembly hall. The hall was vast, with thousands of seats and rows filled with beings of all shapes and morphologies. There was a constant quiet buzz, the murmur of hushed voices, respirators, and 1,000 other small pieces of electronics and equipment. The central discussion plinth ahead caught Sergeant Sonata's eyes. While she was unsurprised to see the officials, diplomats she had learned were some of the heads of the United Alliance, what truly caught her attention was a species that she had never seen on the platform before. It distracted her enough that she almost missed noticing the Nations of Earth delegation already standing there, the primary group in opposition to the Martians' successful bid for independence and freedom within the swath of human-controlled worlds. What captured Sonata's attention, though, was a new alien on the platform. The alien's skin had somewhat different coloration from the one that she had seen a few nights earlier, but it was still similar enough to surprise her. It was this Horpos who began the remarks. The gentle whinnies and growls were automatically translated by the hall's equipment, and Sonata heard the voice ring out clearly. Once our people roamed the grass fields and only knew each other, before we reached the stars and found so many others out there. But despite being surrounded by so many lives, so many species, we felt the loss of our herd in our travels and dealings with the other races of the stars. But not 10 cycles previous. That changed. My grandmother passed away, taken to return to the infinite felt. But she did not die alone. Despite being surrounded by thousands of other races and billions of other individuals, none of whom even knew her name, she did not die alone. Specifically, she did not die alone because a human was there. Several of them, and they comforted her, regardless of their own needs, desires, or divisions as she died. So, we make this formal request now. With the Harpus's endorsement, humanity should be given an equal seat in the Alliance. We believe that despite whatever may temporarily divide them, the Alliance as a whole will be strengthened by the compassion that unites them. End of story. I'd quickly like to thank the T5 peeps: Cold War Boomerwaffen, Severin Cerberus, Bushmaster 177, Henry the Red, Caspar Arnholtz, Cold War Boomerwaffen, Elijah Silvercross, Dragzoon WRE, and Severin Cerberus. Thank you very much.